Hello, so today I'm going to show you some 3D paper form techniques, different ways that you can create 3D shapes or forms out of paper. And so the first one is very simple. It's called a roll, where you can just simply, and you'll probably be familiar with this from Christmas, making paper chains for your Christmas tree, or maybe you've made a paper chain in your classroom, but you just take skinny strips of paper and you put glue on one end and you curl it around, put those two edges together, and you pinch and hold until you make a circle shape. And you kind of got to hold it for a little while. Now, you can just use skinny strips to do this, or you could do a wider strip. You could take a wider strip and put a piece of glue to make a different kind of roll. This would be a longer, skinny roll. Something like that. So that's how you make a roll. So another thing that you could make is called a loop, where you take a strip, put a little bit of glue, and you just bring the two ends together and you make kind of like a teardrop shape. And this is called a loop. And your loop could be long and skinny. So just depending on the size, the length, the width of your paper can change the look of these paper techniques. So by using a square piece of paper for a loop or for a roll, I get a long tube shape. When I use a long strip, then it looks more like a circle. With the loop, the same thing. I could take one of these squares, bring the ends together to make that teardrop shape, and I get a totally, completely different look to the same technique, the loop. So this is a loop, and then this is a loop. And it'd be a completely different, two different kinds of paper, the same technique, but they look completely different. So this is an example of a loop. Okay, you could curl it. And there are different ways to curl your paper. You could just take it and carefully twist it and roll it around. You could, if it's round enough and not too flat, you could put it on the table and push it. You can roll it really tight so that you get a small little curl. You could pull it and make the curl bigger. Again, you could roll a square or piece of paper to get a different look to a curl. You could try to use your scissors. Now, if you try this once and it doesn't work, don't continue to try it over and over again. So with this, I could take and pull this across the blade of my scissors. So I'm holding one end of it, I'm putting the paper on the blade, I'm putting my thumb over the top of the paper, and I'm pulling it across my blade, and it's kind of starting to curl. It's a big curl, but the more I pull it, the curlier it becomes, the more I pull it across my paper. And so this could create a totally different kind of curl. So that's curl. The next one is tabs, where you can take a strip and you're going to fold the strip in half long ways. And then you're going to cut tabs on one half of this strip. So the strip's folded and I have a crease. I'm going to cut some tabs, all about the same size. Tabs kind of are usually like squares, but sometimes they're rectangles. You're going to cut tabs on one half of the strip, and then you're going to take and fold. All of them are facing this direction towards me. You're going to take every other one and you're going to fold it the opposite direction. So you're going to fold it back. So you're going to leave one facing this way towards me, and you're going to fold the next one facing the other direction. Then what you do is you put glue on these tabs, and then you can make this strip bend and curl and become wavy just by holding these tabs down and bending and curving your paper. So now this paper was a straight strip, and by using tabs and holding those down, it's now a wavy strip. So that's how you do tabs. Okay, another technique is fringing. Fringing is where you cut skinny slits up, but you leave them all attached at the top. So you don't cut them off, you don't cut all the way up, you leave some space at the top. And fringing can be, you could cut these wider or skinnier. I usually, when I fringe paper, I usually cut them pretty close together and skinnier, almost trying to kind of create maybe something that looks a little bit like hair. And you could do long fringe like this, or you could turn your paper and you could do shorter fringe on the short side of the paper. They don't have to be long. Sometimes we use this to create like 3D grass, because if we turn it this way, then it kind of looks like grass if we were to cut this out of green paper. Okay, so this is fringing in two different looks, long and short. Now you could take the fringe, another technique with the fringe is to curl it. So I could take, now I don't want to just hold it down here at the bottom and curl it with my scissors, because I could pull these off. I want to put my thumb and finger here at the edge where the cut is, and I only want to curl a couple of these at a time. So I'm pinching here where the cut is, not down here where the cut isn't, because then I would end up pulling these right off. So I'm holding them and I'm gently pulling this across my blade like I showed you in the curling technique. Oops, see, I just ripped that one off by accident. So I could just recycle that, and I could, if that bothers you, I could just take and cut that off, and then no one would know I made that mistake. So you do fringe, and you could curl the fringe, or you could fold the fringe back and forth to create kind of a pleated fringe. So you just fold it back and forth. And so that's another way. So we have curled and pleated. Another technique is called the pleat, where you take your paper and you fold it back and forth. So I'm folding the tip forward. Now I'm going to flip it back and fold it down. Flip it up, fold it up, flip it back. And I just keep flipping it and folding it back and forth, so that when you're done, it kind of looks like a zigzag. So I have a little zigzag, and that's because I folded them real close together. I could do more of a wider pleat where I do it, and so I get more of a wider pleat. I could pleat my paper. There's nothing that says I have to pleat my paper the way that I just did. I could pleat it the long way like this. Okay, so there's a pleated paper. Okay, another thing you could do is fold your paper and cut on the fold. So I could take my paper, fold it in half, and I could cut a shape out of my folded paper. And then I have this, and I could glue this down sticking up off my paper to create some sort of 3D form. I could also fold a long strip in half like this, and I could cut multiple shapes out with the fold. Open it up, and I could glue that as a form sticking up off my paper. So this technique is cutting on the fold. Another technique is to do a spiral. You could do a spiral on a rectangle. You just start cutting one edge. When you get close to the top, turn your paper, cut around, but you're not cutting this off, you're going around until you get to the middle of your paper. So I just keep cutting and turning my paper all the way around to the middle. Okay, and there's a spiral. You could obviously do this in a circle. So you could cut a circle shape out And you could use my circle patterns to help you with this, and take that and trace around it to start with. Cut that out so you get a nice circle. Okay, and then you just keep cutting and turning and going in towards the center of the circle. And you could pull on these and manipulate these to make them more 3D. So this is spiral. Okay, we could do a cone where you take a circle pattern, trace around it, cut it out. Okay, then you're going to cut a straight line in towards the middle of the circle, and then you put glue on one side of that line, and then you overlap. So you lift up and you bring this over and you overlap, and look, the paper becomes a cone shape and it sticks up and becomes 3D. Now, this might be tricky to glue down on your paper. So if it's tricky to glue down on your paper, use your scrap to create a tab. Remember, we use tabs for this, so you're going to create a tab so you could glue your cone down on your paper. So you take a scrap piece of paper, put a little glue on it, glue it to the inside of your cone, so it's like a cone with a tab, and then you can bend this tab over like this, put some glue on there, and glue the tab down on the paper. And right now my cone is sticking up almost like an umbrella, which is kind of interesting, but you could push it down so it would sit more flat on your paper. So that's how you would glue this 3D cone shape down on your paper. Okay, a rectangular prism. Basically, it's you taking a strip of paper and making a square out of it. So the first thing that you do is you fold a tiny little edge over for a tab. Then you take and you bring this paper and fold it in half, find the middle, open it back up, and then bring both sides to the middle. Now I'm going to open it up, and this is why you have the tab, because you're going to glue that tab onto the folded edge of your rectangular prism. You're going to hold that tab closed, and then you've created a square. And this is just like when you did the loops and the curls, depending on what kind of paper you have. It could be long and skinny like this, and you'd have a bigger rectangular prism. You could make it even skinnier. So remember, you fold a tab over, a tiny little tab, then you take and you fold the strip in half, open it up, bring one end to the middle, fold, the other end to the middle and fold, open it up, put a little glue on your tab, and then bring the ends together, and there you have a big rectangular prism. And you could glue these sticking up off your paper or flat down on your paper. How would you glue this onto your paper like this? You would make a tab. So you would take your scrap paper or find some scrap paper, make another tab just like we did for our cone shape, glue that on, and then fold this over and glue that down on your paper, and that's how you would make this stick. So that's a rectangular prism. So let's do a triangular prism. So with a triangular prism, you don't fold over a little tab. What you do is you fold the strip in half, open it up, bring both ends to the center, and then you take these two ends and you make them overlap to make a triangle. So I took these two, they're folded like this, open it up and overlap to make a triangle, and you just put glue on one of the sides and you make the two sides overlap and you create a triangle that way. So do that one more time with a shorter piece. You fold it in half, open it up, bring one end toward the middle, another end toward the middle, put glue on one of them, and then overlap the two to create a triangular prism. So depending on how skinny or fat and how long your strip is would determine the size of your rectangular prisms. You could glue those together. Okay, another thing that we could use to create things is to create something is using slits. So I'm going to start with a rectangular prism to start with as my base, and I'm going to cut a slit into the rectangular prism, which means I'm just going to cut a little snip or a slit into the side of my rectangular prism, and then I can take something that is flat and I could slide that right into the slit, and it holds that in there very securely. I could take and curl my paper. I'm going to curl it going one way, curl it going the other way, create an S, and then I could take that and put that into the slit, and it would hold it there. And that's another interesting way that you could create a 3D form, is start with a base of like a rectangular prism or triangular prism, and then add a slit and add another technique that I've talked about into that shape. And finally, the last technique that you could use to create 3D forms out of paper is you could use my crimping tool. So my crimping tool, obviously your paper couldn't be wider than the crimping tool. It has a handle and an orange part to the handle, because when you put your paper through, you leave these two open. You don't squeeze them, so you leave them open. You take your paper, and if you look right here, there are arrows pointing this direction. So that's telling you this is where you put your paper. So I take my paper and I lay it on the blue and I push it in towards the silver part right there, and you can see when it starts to go in. Then before I push it in too far, I'm going to squeeze the orange and the blue together. Squeeze. I'm right-handed, so I need to use my left hand to squeeze the blue and the orange together. It holds the paper in there, and then I use this orange knob and I turn. And this is called a crimper, and it crimps your paper into tiny little pleats almost. So we did our own pleats earlier. This could pleat your paper for you tiny. Just like that. Now, there's nothing that says you have to do it this way. You could put your paper in this way. Remember, I keep it open, push the paper in, then I squeeze to hold the paper in, and then I twist. And you could crimp your paper. So those are all the different 3D paper form techniques that you could use today to create your own paper sculpture. And I would like you to use a couple or all of these techniques in your sculpture somehow.